Marcelo Vignali, a happiness worth fighting for. A happiness worth fighting for, Marcelo Vignali.
I'm happy to be here. I am happy to be standing right here. Because you see, I found my happiness years ago in a very unlikely place. I found it while sitting in my wheelchair. Let's go ahead and wind the clock back. Let's go back 15 years. I was an avid runner. I was running 12 miles a day. I was Mr. Fitness. Imagine, I could wear out my running shoes before they even got dirty. But one day I had fallen while running. And instead of healing like I normally would, I started getting worse. And every day that I woke up, I was worse off than I was the day before. I went to several doctors looking for an answer, but none of them could tell me what was happening to me. And soon, I started having to use a crutch to get around. I can't even begin to tell you how embarrassing that was. Imagine me, Mr. Fitness, the guy who was running 12 miles, now having to hobble around on a crutch. I was ashamed. I was embarrassed. But soon it was two crutches. And when I could no longer stand, I started to crawl around the house on my hands and knees, fighting as hard as I possibly could so I wouldn't end up in a wheelchair. I did this for a month. Now, my wife, God bless her, she was the one that picked up the wheelchair and brought it home. She did this because she knew that I wouldn't. I was 30 years old, a father for the first time, and now I was confined to a wheelchair. Months continued to go by. My daughter learned to walk while I was in that wheelchair. I remember thinking, am I ever going to be able to walk beside her? How long am I going to be in this situation? Am I going to be able to dance with her at her wedding? Again, painful months continued to go by. I saw a neurologist. Now, she gave me an assessment, but she sealed it in an envelope. And I was supposed to take this to another doctor. No. I was done waiting. I had been waiting now for almost a year and a half. She was doctor number 10 in a lineup of doctors. I was done waiting. I opened up that envelope. I read that letter. Her assessment that I get a bone cancer screening. I remember thinking, wow, bone cancer. If this is bone cancer, I'm a goner. I've waited too long. A year and a half. There wasn't a part of me that wasn't being affected. Top of my head, all the way down to my feet. I was in constant pain, 24/7. I started thinking about all the things that this disease had taken away from me. And I started getting angry. And the angrier I got, the more I started to realize that it had taken something else that was precious to me. It had taken away my happiness. And I asked myself, well, what is happiness? What is it? And I thought, happiness isn't what happens to me. Happiness is my attitude. It's my response to what happens to me. And if that's the case, then this disease couldn't touch my happiness. I was willing to crawl around the house for a month, fighting as hard as I possibly could. But you see, my happiness, I gave it up just like that, without a fight. Well, at that moment, I knew exactly how I was going to fight this disease. I was going to fight this disease for my happiness. Regardless of my circumstances, regardless of my situation, and regardless of any diagnosis, I was prepared to be happy. It was doctor number 11 that gave me my diagnosis. Thankfully, mercifully, it wasn't cancer. Ankylosing spondylitis. It's a rare form of rheumatism that not only affects all the connective tissue in my body, but also affects my lung tissue and my heart valve. And there's no cure. But still, the doctors can slow down the progress of this disease with medications, and soon I found myself back up on my crutches. But you see, my perception had changed. These were the same crutches a year and a half earlier I was ashamed of using, but now I was grateful. I was grateful to be on those crutches. On those crutches, I learned gratitude. In that wheelchair, Mr. Fitness found a little humility. In all the pain and darkness of my own despair, I found a happiness worth fighting for. It's a shame it took me so long to realize that happiness isn't what happens to us. Happiness is our response. It's our attitude about what happens to us. And that each and every one of us can choose happiness at any given moment in our life, regardless of our circumstances, regardless of our situations, and regardless of any diagnosis. We can simply choose to be happy. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm happy to be here. I'm happy to be standing right here. I'm just happy to be standing.